Hello YouTube, Sir Dragon X here, coming to you from my hometown of San Miguel de Allende. I am currently 55 years old and retired at 52. Today we're going to discuss how I retired early and moved to Mexico in the video coming up next. Welcome back to Retired Life in Mexico, No Bull. Not only will we present you with the facts, but we present you with a true reality. My wife and I were recently watching a series on Netflix called Money Explained. There was an episode in the series called Retirement Explained. After watching this series, it was a wake-up call for me, and I felt compelled to make this video. It is filled with some very interesting facts about retirement that I want to share with you. And I want to share my experience of how I retired early and the reality we all face whether we retire early or retire at a later age. Before we start, I want to remind you to subscribe to this channel and hit the little bell so you don't miss any of my future videos. I also encourage you to like this video if you enjoyed the content and leave comments with any questions that you may have in the comment section or just to let me know how I'm doing. Also, don't forget to visit us on Facebook and Instagram at the links listed in this video and in the description of this channel. As I always state in my videos, I'm not an expert. I also remind my audience that every individual experience is different. This video was not created to give you advice. Rather, it was created to educate individuals on the reality we all face in retirement, whether you decide to retire early or at a later age. I also want to share my personal story on how I was fortunate enough to retire at the early age of 52, but I did face some issues that I will point out in this video. I really didn't realize these issues until I watched this series on Netflix. I also want to share with you why we chose Mexico as an alternative to retirement in the United States and never looked back, but it didn't come without its challenges. I want to share with you some interesting statistics and facts that were pointed out in the Netflix episode by the experts. Currently, experts suggest that to retire comfortably, a middle-class American should save at least $1 million to maintain their current lifestyle. In most wealthy countries, the average 65-year-old has saved enough to keep their current quality of life up until their early 70s. But in fact, they're expected to live well into their mid-80s. Experts further point out that most people will not be able to maintain their standard of living into retirement. In the United States, a quarter of the workforce doesn't even have any type of retirement savings. What reality do we face? Can we afford to retire at all? 92% of Americans are not meeting the retirement savings target. The Social Security system actually replaces, on average, around 40% of your pre-retirement earnings if you retire at full retirement age. So, that means if you make an average salary of $4,000 a month, you can expect a Social Security benefit of about $1,500 a month. The experts on the Netflix series said to think of it as a stool with legs. The first leg is a pension, the second leg is Social Security, and the third leg is personal savings. For many years, this system seated retirees very comfortably. Experts point out that in the 1980s, things started to change and shake up drastically. The 401k was created, and this shifted the responsibility of retirement from the employer to the employee. As a result, pensions started to disappear as the 401k took off and became the new model for retirement, promising people that they would meet their savings goals. This included the federal government, which switched from a full pension plan to a 401k and pension combination plan. The experts further state that currently only 59% of Americans have access to a 401k, which promised at the time to meet these retirement savings goals. What was discovered through research is that most Americans don't have enough money saved for their later years. Another interesting fact that was pointed out by the experts is that 60% of the workforce in the United States earns less than $50,000 a year, which makes savings difficult or almost impossible for the average middle-class American. So what's the result? Most retirees are going back into the workforce, depending on the government assistance, or see themselves working well into their 70s or even until death. Now, the interesting thing is that the experts pointed out that corporate America's answer to this is that since the responsibility is up to the individual, why not work longer? Because you have a higher life expectancy. The experts go on to say that just because we live longer does not mean that we need to work longer. There comes a point when people should have the option to rest and spend their time doing something else besides working, but it's simply not a choice for most. In the 1980s, when the US was experimenting with 401k retirement plans, the UK did the same thing and figured out very quickly that it wasn't working and switched back to the pension system, which now requires employers to provide a pension program. This system in the UK is known as the National Employee Savings Trust, or NEST for short. So what's the bottom line? The United States is actually facing a retirement crisis. Is there an option for people wanting to retire? This is what I did. Let me tell you a little bit about myself before I actually explain. I spent 30 years working as a federal law enforcement agent for the United States government. I worked for 2 different federal law enforcement agencies prior to retiring in 2018. In the United States, federal law enforcement agents are required by law to retire by the age of 57, or they can retire earlier with 20 to 25 years of service. The retirement system consists of a combination of a pension based on the number of years of service along with a 401k. Also, I receive what is called a Social Security supplement since I retired prior to 62. Now, it sounds like I made out like a bandit, right? Pension, 401k, plus a Social Security supplement? You must be sitting nice in retirement, right? Well, actually, truth is that I am currently making approximately 40 to 50% of what I was making when I was working. So in reality, most middle-class Americans are in the same situation as me, or worse. The reason I know this is that most of my coworkers in my situation are now working a second job just to sustain their same lifestyle post-retirement. I worked 30 years of my life waiting for the day that I would no longer have to work and enjoy life to its fullest. When I started my career over 30 years ago, I was sold this vision of retiring at 50, which actually was an illusion that I would have sufficient income when I retired to maintain the same level of lifestyle. Truth is, I took a pay cut, and a big one to say the least. I never thought about this until I submitted my paperwork for a retirement estimate. When I saw the numbers, I was in a big dilemma. Do I stay until 57? Running the numbers at 52 versus 57 didn't make much of a difference, so I decided to get out while I was still young enough to pursue other opportunities. So I put my paperwork in to retire and decided that we had enough money that I could take a year off of work to decide the direction of my future. I also convinced my wife to stop working because we figured that I would be able to provide sufficient income between a new job and my pension. So we used that year to take a break and travel. We traveled to Colombia, New York, and eventually San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. When we traveled to Colombia, I started toying around with the idea of moving to another country. I started to look into the cost of living in Colombia, but never actually considered moving there. The idea of moving to another country was totally out of the question, but I was just curious. When we traveled to San Miguel de Allende, we fell in love with the area. We saw a booth in the downtown advertising houses for sale, and we were curious and just decided to take a tour of the houses just to get an idea of the housing here. Well, needless to say, we actually bought a house here with the idea that we had enough money saved and we could actually use this as a vacation home and rent for extra passive income. When we returned home to the States and I really started to reflect, one of my biggest frustrations was that my dream of living a retired life at 52 had been shattered. I started figuring that I would be working at least another 10 or 15 years. I kind of went into depression of sorts, but then a light bulb went off. I asked myself, how much would it cost to move and live in Mexico? Could we maintain our same quality of lifestyle there? I started to do research. Why not? We just bought a house there. After a little research, we decided to take the plunge and move to Mexico and haven't looked back since. Actually, it worked out for the best because 1 year after I retired, I was diagnosed with head and neck cancer. I will be covering my cancer treatment in a future video about medical care here in Mexico. My point being is that I can't imagine how I would have gotten through cancer treatment while maintaining a full-time job. Being diagnosed with cancer is a big wake-up call. Enjoying life to its fullest and living a healthy lifestyle became a priority to us. We came to the realization that all the material goods that we had amassed and the comfort of life in the United States will never replace living a full and rich life. But we also realized in order to maintain the same lifestyle, we were going to have to keep working at least another 10 to 15 years. At the end of it all, we ended up moving to a place we fell in love with. We maintained almost an equivalent lifestyle. I now have time to relax after 30 years in the workforce, and I'm enjoying new hobbies such as creating this YouTube channel. Now, it wasn't easy, and it was definitely a challenge and a lifestyle change, but it has its rewards. We had to adapt to a totally different culture, give up a lot of the comforts we were used to, and we took a big risk. All I can say, it was worth the risk. Once we adjusted, we feel we made the best decision ever. To actually be honest with you, I'm healthier now at 55 years old than I was in my 20s due to the fresh organic food at affordable prices. We walk and exercise more than ever and enjoy traveling and exploring the beautiful culture of Mexico. We don't live on credit. We don't live beyond our means, which has all worked out for the best. Now, I said I wasn't here to give you advice, but I will leave you what we learned based on our experience. Don't just move to a foreign country for the cost of living. Think of the cost of living as a benefit, not a need. Pick a place you fall in love with, not just the first place you visit. And realize that you are in a totally different culture and that you need to adapt to that culture or it could turn out more catastrophic than beneficial. Last but not least, you may have to adjust your spending lifestyle. Now, with all that being said, it was the best decision that we ever made and my illusion actually became a reality. Until next time, stay tuned for our next video and don't forget to subscribe and like this video if you enjoyed it.